Hi, welcome back. We are in chapter 5, and this is the third video for this series. We're going to go through slides 46 through 56 and talk about muscular tissue and nervous tissue. So remember, I just want to remind you there are 4 primary tissue types. There is epithelial tissue, which we covered in video 1. There is the connective tissue, which is vast, right? And we covered connective tissue in video 2. And then now in video 3, we're going to talk about the muscular tissue and the nervous tissue. So we're going to talk about 2 tissue types in this video. So I'm going to go and call up our video or our slides. And we're going to start out by talking about muscular tissue. So muscular tissue is found throughout the body. It's a really fragile tissue, and in most cases, it can be repaired pretty well. Muscle tissue is all about contraction. It gets smaller to bring things closer together, and then it relaxes and pushes things apart. This is important for our muscles to move our body for locomotion, but it's also important as we move food from one place to the other throughout our body, and as our heart beats. So contraction, we contract our heart, boom, 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 boom. All right, so muscle tissue contracts. It also generates body heat for us. So as our muscles contract, it makes us warmer. If you are ever sitting around and you're cold in your house, but your house is like 68 to 70 degrees, if you get up into 10 jumping jacks, you will get warmer because the muscle tissue, when it contracts and releases, it releases heat. That's why you're always warmer when you're exercising. Muscle tissue is going to be involved in our digestion and our respiration as we breathe in and out, blood flow and regulating blood flow, and also waste elimination. Whenever you poop or whenever you pee, you contract some muscles. Muscle tissue can be voluntary or involuntary. Voluntary means that you are in control of it. So that's every skeletal muscle. So my brain is telling my fingers to contract and relax. But it can also be involuntary. You are not thinking about your blood vessels opening up or getting smaller. You are not thinking about and controlling your digestion. So that's called involuntary control. So muscle tissue can be voluntary or involuntary. The mechanism, how these things contract, is the same in every muscle tissue with slight variations. And we will learn a ton about that when we go on to the muscular system later on this term. Muscle tissue is highly vascular. That means there's lots of blood flowing to it. Metabolically active, which means it's making lots and lots of ATP. Every time you contract a muscle, you're using ATP. So we need to make a lot. So it's using up a lot of your glucose and a lot of your nutrients. And it's also highly innervated by nerves. So your brain, your nervous system, is going to be controlling these different things. All right, there are 3 different types of muscle: skeletal muscle, smooth muscle, and cardiac muscle. We're going to talk about each one of those individually. So skeletal muscle is the one that's attached to your skeleton. So these are the muscles that are going to be moving and allowing you to, allowing your body to move. Okay. These these cells, when you look at them underneath a microscope, they have long lines in them, and these are called striations. So we're going to look at that in the next picture. So they're very long. So there's a muscle cell in your bicep that starts in your elbow and goes all the way up to your shoulder. So these cells are really, really long, and they're multinucleate, which means that they have more than one nucleus. Cells do not divide, so we don't make more of these cells, but they can get bigger. So when somebody's working out and they get these big, beautiful muscles and they're just built, right? They don't have more muscle cells than anybody else usually, but they do have bigger muscles. So they pack more into their cells. Skeletal muscles under voluntary control, which means you are in control of it, and it is controlled by something called the somatic nervous system, which you'll learn about in 232. Functions, locomotion, facial expressions. If you think about how we communicate with each other, we totally depend upon skeletal muscle. Protection of organs, generating heat, and close openings. You have got an opening at your anus that you are in control of, and that's called a sphincter. So when you open that sphincter, you allow yourself to poo. You can hold it in pretty good, and it's under voluntary control. That is skeletal muscle. So here's a picture of these cells. So this is an individual cell. There are multiple nuclei in this cell. And then we see striations, and the striations are going this way. So the fiber is really long, and then the striations go opposite that. So here is one whole cell, and it actually stretches off the screen. And then the nucleus is stuck over to the side. You have packed that cell with so much actin and myosin, you've shoved the nucleus over to the side so it just gets out of the way. When you see the striations and when you see these straight lines, that tells you that it's skeletal muscle. Smooth muscle doesn't have striations. So smooth muscle doesn't, that's why it's called smooth. It doesn't have those sharp lines. These cells are uninucleate, which means they have one nucleus, and they're tapered on both ends. So they look like this, where you've got tapering on both sides and a nucleus. Okay, there's no striations. It's under involuntary control, and we see these lining our blood vessels, in our digestive tract, in your uterus, in lots of different places. These are involuntary, so we are not in control of those. So if you look at them, you're going to have individual cells. So here is one cell, and the nucleus is that long, skinny thing. The third type of muscle is the cardiac muscle. The cardiac muscle is found only in your heart. It is involuntary. Your brain is not telling your heart to beat. Your brain will tell your heart how fast to beat, so it controls the rate of the beating, but the cells actually will beat on their own. If we take the cells out of a beating heart and put it into a dish, those cells will beat on their own. They are involuntary. They are striated, just like the skeletal muscles, but they are uninucleate, so only one nucleus. The cells are not laid out perfectly on top of each other, but they are branched. So you'll have one cell that looks like that with one nucleus, and then you'll have striations. So I'll show you a picture in a second. The cells are connected, so you'll have one cell that ends here, and then another cell starts here. This area, the junction between the two, is really important, and it's an identifier for cardiac muscle. It's called the intercalated disc. So the intercalated disc is actually a really hard sieve. So it's got holes in it. So it's like this hard connection that's a tight junction. And then there are gap junctions. There are circles that go through the intercalated disc that allows materials from one cytoplasm, one cell's cytoplasm, to move to the other cell's cytoplasm. And that speeds up the connection. So anything that's going on in the cytoplasm in one cell is going to go on in the cytoplasm of the other cell. Cardiac muscle uses a ton of your glucose and makes a ton of ATP. Think about how that thing is beating in your chest all the time, every day, 24/7. And so it uses up a lot of glucose. A bad thing about cardiac muscle is that it cannot repair itself. If you damage cardiac muscle, it will not fix itself. So here's a picture of, here's one cell right here. And here's an intercalated disc. Here's an intercalated disc. These darker lines are the intercalated discs, and you will only see them ever in your life in cardiac muscle. So cardiac muscle has intercalated discs, and that's what makes them intercalated. You can see the striations, the lighter lines that go this direction, and then you'll have a darker line, and these are connectors between these cardiac muscle cells. All right, so we have talked about muscle tissue. There are 3 different types of muscle tissue: skeletal muscle, smooth muscle, and cardiac muscle. And it's your responsibility to be able to memorize the function of each one, where we find it in our bodies, and what it looks like. And all of that information is here on this table for you, so you can memorize it easier. So I would probably make this table again and fill it in myself by using the slides to try and fill it in, and then use this just to make sure that I got everything correct. So set up the basics of this table and then fill it in. All right, now nervous tissue is our last major tissue type. Nervous tissue is it's going to make up your nervous system. And it's located in the brain, the spinal cord, and the nerves. And its big job is to conduct electrical impulses. So an electrical charge will move along the cell membrane from one place to the other. They're like wires carrying information throughout the body. There are two basic cell types that make up the nervous tissue. There are neurons and neuroglia. So if we look in this picture here, the yellow cell with all the funny arms coming off of it, all those strings coming off of it, that is a neuron. And then there are lighter blue cells here, and those are called glial cells. The neurons are going to be the cells that carry the information. The glial cells are going to be support for the neurons. You actually have more glial cells in your brain than you do have neurons. So neurons are all about transmitting information. Chemical signals are going to move across synapses, and then they start an electrical charge in the cell, and then the electrical charge moves from one end to the other. These cells are the longest in your body. You have a cell that starts in the bottom of your vertebra, your backbone, and it goes all the way to the ends of your tippy toes. So that is a really long cell, and it will carry information from your backbone or from your spinal cord all the way down to your toe. The cells are going to have different parts that we'd like you to memorize: dendrites, cell bodies, and axons. Now, a real basic, easy picture of one type of nerve or neuron cell is that we have dendrites at one end, we have a cell body, and then we have a long axon. So these up here are called dendrites. The cell body has the nucleus. And then this whole area down here is the axon. Okay, so information travels through a neuron from the dendrites to the cell body, all the way down to the axon, where it talks to another cell at the end of the axon. That's where we find our synapse. Neurons are really bad at regenerating. Most of the times they don't regenerate if you kill the cell body. If you break it at the axons can regrow. So if you cut a nerve and you don't kill the cell body, the nerve can regrow, but really, really slowly, usually. Neuroglia cells or just glial cells are support cells. There are 6 or 7 different types. You will memorize those later on in this term when we get to the nervous system. So they are all about support and protect, insulation, and supply nutrients to the neurons. So the big player is the neuron, the minor player is the glial cell. In this picture, you have a cell that has lots of dendrites, a cell body, and a long axon. That is the neuron. So the biggest thing right there, the darkest thing in this picture is the neuron. This is our nucleus. And then all these little darker purple circles are the nuclei of neuroglia cells. So you have one neuron in this picture, and then you have many neural glia, which are supporting and taking care of that nerve or that neuron. All right, that's it for this video. We'll come back and do another one, but you are all finished with your basic introduction to the 4 primary tissue types. Hopefully you are feeling confident. If you're not, then please ask questions. Bring those questions to a recitation, send me emails. Let's get it figured out. All right, hopefully you're filling in your study guides, and if you have any problems with those study guides, please send me an email. Okay, thanks very much. Bye.